As we study the book of Bereshit, one of the big topics is that of names. There are so many different names in the book of Bereshit, beginning with Adam, going, of course, to Noah, to Abraham, to Sarah, whose names were chosen and whose names were changed. Then we have the fathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, the 12 tribes, why they were named this particular name. And occasionally the Torah will tell us not just that a person was named, but why they were given that name. And we see this in reference to Noach, the main character of the Parsha. In fact, the Parsha is named after him, Parshat Noach, the Parsha of Noah. And what the Torah does is that it lists the 10 generations that came between Adam and Noah. And it gives all of their names. And when it comes to Noah, the Torah makes a slight change. In each case, it says that A had a child, and B had a child, and C had a child. When it came to Noah, the Torah is specific to tell us that his father had a ben, a son, and that this son was called Noach. Why? Because this child will give us rest from the difficulty of our hands, from the suffering of our hands. What does this mean? Well, first of all, Rashi explains that the Torah here refers to Noach as a ben, not just because he was a son, but the word ben coming from binyan, which means a builder. Through Noah and his children, the world will be rebuilt after the flood. And this identifies for us the one characteristic of Noah, that Noah is a builder. Of course, he built the ark, but then he rebuilt the world. He rebuilt civilization after the deluge. Then the Torah tells us the meaning of his name. This child will bring us rest from the difficulty, from the suffering of our hands. What does that mean? Well, we know that after Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, God cursed the world, and he made it very, very difficult for people to produce their livelihood. And not only that, but when they would do agriculture, they would plant one item, and then the land would produce thistles and thorns. Agriculture was very, very difficult, and they never had any implements. Noah came along, and he produced the first kli machresha, the first plow. He was a technological wonderkind. This is something that for us is a very, very basic instrument, but in that time, this changed absolutely everything. Agriculture was always done by hand, and now finally they had an implement. So his father somehow prophetically realized that this is what Noach would bring to the world. He would allow us to have some rest from all of the difficulty of what our life has become. And if we go back a few generations, we see that there are one or two other people who also made technological advances. The first, who was a descendant of Cain, whose name was Yuval, was the first one to shape and to make musical instruments. This was the first time man had always expressed himself perhaps through dancing and clapping their hands, and he came up with musical instruments. What was his motivation? Rashi tells us his motivation, in fact, was a negative motivation, in that he wanted to sing and praise idolatrous forces. But nevertheless, even though the motivation was no good, it produced this wonderful technology of music. Then there was a further child in that particular line, a descendant of Cain, and this child's name was Tuval Cain, which is an unusual name. And the Torah tells us that he was the first one to shape metal. What does the word Tuval mean? Tuval means to perfect. Tuval Cain means he perfected the work of Cain. Cain, of course, as we know, was the first one to commit murder, fratricide against his brother. But he must have done it by hand. Came along a few generations later, Tuval Cain produced the first weapons. He perfected the trade of Cain. Once again, we see technological advances, here for negative purposes, to facilitate murder and killing. And it's in fact very fascinating that many of the technological advances that we see in the world today came about because of the military. The military needed better aircraft, they needed better radar systems, and it was all to do with war. But ultimately, mankind has benefited. So what we see in Noah is really the beginning of technology. And we know that as technology progresses, the world changes. And that's what Noah's father saw, that the world is going to change. He is going to make it easier for us. And of course, today we have so many implements that, at least we are told, make our lives easier. We have cell phones, we have computers, we have cars, They are there to take away our stress. And that's what we should use them for, because the belief is that there's no such thing as a negative technology or a positive technology. It's neutral. It's parith. It can be used for the good and it can be used for the bad. It could be Tuvul Kain, who used metal for murder, or it could be Noah, who used it for agriculture and perfecting and building the world. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.